make a profit off of that. So that profit piece is what we're talking about here today. We all know that money matters, and one of our main things that we like to do is make sure that you have some money mindfulness education and some financial literacy. So I'm going to pass the mic to my co-host, OGTG. Take it away.
Hey guys, how you doing? I really like to welcome everybody to the show today. We got 38 participants in here. That's a new record, and we're going to be hitting 100 and 1,000. Will be our next records coming up. So I appreciate y'all being here today for the show. We do this every other Tuesday, our Money Talks Tuesday with Coach Reese and myself. I've been an investor in both real estate and stocks for over 20 years. Or actually 25 years now. Boy, time is flying when you're having fun. But yeah, I've learned a lot of things. I like to, give insight on different things that I do and ways that I make credit cards hate me, companies hate me, in much the same way that Reese does. And so one of the things we want to do is, bring some guests in too onto the show here. So it's just not, Reese and I talking about how we're, working the different systems with money, which, it's part of life. I mean, money does contribute to just about everything, whether you're paying tuition or whether you're buying a house or working a job. And so how you manipulate that money, can make a big difference in the long term of your life. And so we thought we'd bring in some wonderful, awesome guest speakers. We have some history professors from Pierce College who are going to be with us today, so they can share insight both on money issues, but specifically today, it's going to be the history of money and some things that they'll talk about that are going to be very surprising. And it really, we just want to make sure people just kind of understand the history today is kind of where our focus is. So I'd like to welcome to the show our guests today, Karen Sanaga and David Thomas, both from Pierce College faculty. And they will be jumping in here and helping us out today. So yes, so again, my name is Terry Green. I'm the faculty counselor advisor in the TRIO and the EDI department at Pierce College.
And so right before we get started, I want to let you guys know if you have any questions throughout the entire presentation, throw them in the chat. We have somebody monitoring the chat for questions. So if you throw them in there, we'll be able to get to them, and we'll save some time at the end for that. So Karen, David, let's make it do what it do.
Yeah, Terry, thanks for emphasizing that we're here as historians. I don't want to speak for Karen because she studies mostly the 20th century, but I study like the 16 and 1700s. And so you do not want me to give you stock tips and credit card tips. I can give you tips on, how to invest in the 1700s, but do not listen to me talk about the 21st century.
Yeah, and when it comes to money and like just getting into the field of history, like that probably wasn't like the most being like, I'm gonna make some money. Like,
yeah.
But it's also, yeah, and in terms of like just budgeting or anything like that, I have too much credit card debt. I'm not like Terry.
Yeah, you know what? My wife just yesterday was when she saw the title of this thing was like, wait, are you going on there to talk about our personal finances? And I said no. But since you said that, Karen, like that is, historians don't become historians because it's a lucrative field. But that does mean that we stay in school for a long time. We get what it's like to be students. Karen and I, it's not been very long since we were students. And we were doing things like trying to figure out how to pay tuition and go to school and work. And, there's some, from my perspective, not super wise credit card usage that went on in my life. So we're right there with you. And probably actually you're all better off than us because you've been listening to Terry and Coach Reese. Anyway, don't tell Deanna when she walks behind me that I told you that about my credit card.
So I love that you guys have just shared your personal take, because that's a part of this. Money's personal. So that's what sometimes people don't understand, is that regardless of what field you're in, you're going to have some type of relationship with money. And whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, that right there in and of itself is a relationship. So like they just said, they're going to talk to us about the history and the impact on finances in education. And then Terry and I are here to be able to fill in the gaps for you of how you can apply this knowledge to everyday life, because the education that you're getting is real life. You can use it in real life application. So let's start at the top. Really, what our theme is how is money, or how has money always been a part of education in America? But then also, also education, and what are you paying for? Because you're paying for something, and that's what we want to talk about today. So if you want to kick us off in the early 1800s, what does that look like?
You would like me to kick us off? Yeah, great. I'm glad you said Reese, that money is personal. Well, history or education is personal too. I mean, that's one thing historians are good at, is like complicating things. And so we are going to talk about what if people thought they were paying for when they paid for education, whether that was as a student or a parent or as a taxpayer. What do you think you're paying for? And the answers could be multiple, right? They could be different. You might have multiple reasons for pursuing education. I will start us off in the early 1800s because it is around then that we get the first public schools, the first concerted effort to say in the United States that the state, through tax dollars, should pay for schools for everybody. What we would think of as K through 12. There had been places that had done it before. The group of people that you've probably heard of referred to as the Pilgrims, the larger group they were a part of up in Boston and places like that in the 1600s. They had something like public schools too, but it was pretty localized. But in about 1830s to 1860, what's called, and I'll put this in the chat, an age of reform. Historians call this period the age of reform. All these kind of middle-class do-gooders, along with newly rich people who had made money building up factories and manufacturing, start getting interested in all kinds of reform efforts. They want to build things like jails and mental hospitals and hospitals. And one of the things they want to do is schools. And they didn't call them public schools. They were usually at first called common schools. And that was getting at the idea that they were both for sort of the common person, the common people, not the.
Oh no, did he freeze, or is that just me?
I think he froze. That's David. Some of that old money can get frozen, and so this is what happened here. So
I hope it doesn't happen to me. My internet's been a little dicey.
Jaron said he's still in the 1700s. You're absolutely right.
Oh no,
that's what it sounds like.
Yeah. So that does happen. The freezing here, folks. So I'm not sure.
So here's what we can spin though, Terry.
Can
you talk real quick about freezing your credit score?
Yeah, I actually had to kind of look into that. My whole identity was kind of taken there when they started using my unemployment benefits overseas. And then so I had to go in and freeze a lot of things. And so you can freeze, put a freeze on your credit so nobody can open up new credit in your name. And so that's one of the things I had to do. And David just froze his credit real quick there. That's how quick you can do it. You really can go on to the website and you can, and some credit cards are like that too. You can actually go in and freeze things pretty quickly now with the online availability. So that is what you can do. I don't know if he's he come back yet.
Yeah, he's here. So I was going to say too, when it comes to freezing your credit score, it's a strategic move that you would want to do at a certain point in time. Some people will get their credit score to a place that they want it to be at, and then they'll freeze it there. So that way there can be nobody can pull an inquiry out on it because it's frozen. So if you're trying to do something specific with your credit. Let's say you want to go out and get approved for a house or a car or open another credit card, but it's frozen. You're going to have to unfreeze it prior to doing that. So it's a strategic move that some people might get to and say, okay, I'm going to freeze my credit score for right now for the time being because I'm not doing anything. But then when I'm ready to take action again in the credit realm and using credit, then you can unfreeze it. And again, like Terry says, it prevents people from stealing and hacking your credit. So David, we just want to let you know that we got your back. You froze, so we went right into freezing your credit score, and that's exactly what we do here on Money.
That's what happened. Okay.
Yeah, we make sure we can tie anything back to
Yeah.
money when it comes to me and Terry.
I'm glad to hear that. I have a very unreliable computer suddenly, and it just shut off. Like it wasn't even just I lost internet. Shut off. That doesn't happen more than once a day, so hopefully we're okay. Oh, thank you. I'm being welcomed back. So I will unfreeze then. The quick version then of what I was trying to say to get us going is, public schools now and back then, they have been pitched to the public and to individuals, whether it's kids going to school, their parents, taxpayers paying for the school, that it is an empowering institution, that education is important, that it's a civic institution, that is people in a democracy need to be educated, and we need educated citizens. And it's meant to be equalizing, that you should be able to be educated no matter where you're born, who you're born to, what situation you're born into. But also from the beginning, school has had sort of what we would think of as more conservative or controlling tendencies. So not at Pierce, you wouldn't get this kind of controlling approach to education. But if you can think to what it's like to go to a K-12 school, of course, you're learning a lot of stuff that helps you get around in the world, reading, writing, basic math, science, all of these things. But who decides what you're learning? And once they get those subjects, who decides what you're learning from, say, between the time of 9 o'clock and 9:50 and 10 o'clock and 10:50? Who decides when you can go to the bathroom, when your lunch break is? What's being instilled in you when you spend 15 years raising your hand and asking before you leave your seat and all of those things? Well, this goes back to the very beginning of public school, because in the 1830s, 1840s, not only did reformers want educated citizens, but they also wanted educated workers. And this was the era when factories were becoming the primary place for blue-collar employment. And they're taking a bunch of people who are used to working on the family farm and in little workshops at their house where they can decide how to spend their time. And now they need to be in a factory where they know that until the bell rings, you keep sewing buttons or you keep doing whatever your task is. And so very openly, they portrayed these public schools as serving both a progressive purpose and this kind of let's instill this sense of discipline and order and following the rules. And so what are you paying for? You're paying both for that education that's going to get you a job, but you're also paying for, from the standpoint of a factory owner, obedient employees. We're paying taxes for those schools so that we can trust that, Coach Reese and me and Karen and Terry aren't going to get up and just go wander off and start talking about, credit scores when we're supposed to be making whatever it is we're making.
So the reason why the information that David just dropped on us is so key for a couple reasons. One thing that we really like to talk about is creating generational freedom. And a lot of times you'll probably hear generational wealth, but freedom comes from an aspect of achieving healing and healing, but from different generational curses and things that may go on, but also healing from being caught up into capitalism. And so when you hear, especially those from Black and brown communities, when we were brought to America as slaves and such, we were forced into labor. And so when you think about we were forced to work, and then you also think about the school system, and the school system was pretty much designed to create more workers. That's why Terry and I are so adamant about teaching financial literacy, is because it wasn't embedded in the school curriculum intentionally. They intentionally didn't want you to know about this information because they wanted you to be a worker. So when David says, think about who's telling you to do what, when, why, and how, that's because they're training you to work and not necessarily training you to think and how to utilize your money. So that's how it's tied right back into finance. So thank you, David, so much for that.
Yeah, and Reese, let me just add one more thing, and then I'll turn it over to people who can speak beyond the 1830s. Because you just mentioned, slavery and race, and that was one part I didn't mention there, is that story I just told about middle-class reformers wanting to start schools and how that was tied to the factory system. That's only happening in the northern part of the United States. And the reason it's only happening in the north primarily is because in the South, rich slave owners do not want any Black person, whether they are enslaved or free, because there were some free Blacks, to know how to read. For the same reasons that, I mean, for it doesn't, you don't, there's no real historical secret there. It's because reading is power, right? Literacy is power. But they also didn't want to pay money in taxes so that the poor white kids down the street could read, because they didn't need the poor white kids to learn how to read. The factory owners did, because they needed people who could at least kind of learn a little bit on the job and learn about the machines they were operating. So I want to emphasize that from the start too, we have this, it depends where you live, and it depends what your skin color is. And I also just want to reiterate that for these people in the North, like they really do see this as both progressive and disciplinary. So it's kind of hard for us to see, like, well, man, they were like training robots for the factory, but they also did really believe in teaching the poor kids how to read so they could participate in democracy. It's a weird kind of, almost paradoxical way. Okay, you're gonna get me going too much longer.
I love it. And actually what I was wanting to talk about directly correlates with what David just talked about. And so I'm going to continue to talk about the 19th century and talk a little bit about the 1860s and kind of how education actually fit into a larger economic agenda of the nation, but also kind of an imperial and inherently white supremacist agenda of the nation. So I'm a I'm a historian of agriculture. I like to talk about farming and farming education, oddly enough, I guess. And so that's something I'm interested in. And I went to a land grant school. Has anybody heard of a land grant? Land grant university in here? Okay. Yeah. So it's like people don't really know. It tends to be like only people that are like at land grants or maybe working at land grants or go to land grants know what they are. But they're basically schools that developed in like the 1860s. And so basically in 1862, so I'm throwing out really specific numbers like dates here, right? But in 1862, there was a few different pieces of legislation that Abraham Lincoln, the president at the time, signed. One was something called the Morrill Land Grant Act, and which I'll talk about in just a moment. Another was the Pacific Railroad Act, which set up the Transcontinental Railroad. Have y'all heard of that? And then the Homestead Act. Have y'all heard of the Homestead Act? Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, just to throw this out there, who knows about the Homestead Act, or maybe just wants to explain a little bit? If you got explain, and we want to explain. So basically, the Homestead Act, right, provides tracts of land federal lands to people that want to settle essentially west and perhaps usually engage in farming. Okay. And the Pacific Railroad Act sets up the Transcontinental Railroad that connects basically east and west. It connects the entire nation, the transcontinental nation. And then the Moral Land Grant Act does this. It sets up public schools, like colleges in particular, so four-year universities. And basically what the federal government does, it says, okay, every single state in the union, y'all are going to get some land, some free land. We're just going to give this land to you. And that land is an issue. I'll talk about that in just a moment. But these states get land to sell, to build schools, public universities. And the mission of these public universities is to basically teach people about, 160 acres, exactly, with the Homestead Act. So the mission of these schools is to teach people how to be like better farmers, okay? The schooling that people learn is basically agriculture, science, applied sciences, engineering. Like Washington State University is a land grant school. Michigan State is a land grant school. Texas A&M, land grant school. So these are all type of schools that are focused a lot on farming, okay? And basically what we see is that, David was talking a lot about, the mission of school, like mission of public schools in terms of like getting workers prepared for a factory, right? Like there's an agenda behind that education. And behind that education for land grants was to essentially make people better farmers, okay? Make them be part, and then provide people with practical knowledge. Practical knowledge at that time was to be a farmer. A lot of people, if they weren't living in cities, were, what do you think? Probably farming. So this is exactly what like the mission of the nation, like the government wanted people to be better farmers. They wanted to go have those people go out and be like farming across the nation, productivity, doing that productively, being industrious, part and parcel of a larger mission to make the United States a more economically powerful nation. Okay. And the Transcontinental Railroad is part of that. So so that was a lot of different threads, sorry. But what we see is that, beyond like making sure that people can work in a factory, that mission for at least these ag schools is to, provide education that wasn't seen as like elitist. It was practical information that people should know. It's not education that's necessarily going to make people perhaps like a businessman, or initially aimed at being a businessman or a lawyer. It's something that's like education for the salt of the earth, right? For farmers. And then and then they would basically go out, farm, be productive for their community, and also maybe provide like materials for the rest of the nation to sell. Okay. So what we see though is that, as I mentioned earlier, that this is part of a larger kind of imperial mission, and oddly enough. So it's like a really big mission. So what we see is that, like, where do you think that land came from that the government was allocating to schools? Where do you think that land was coming from that the government was giving to railroad companies or states? Where do you think that land was coming from for people to, just settle on? And Jaren, you said my people. Tribes.
I wanted to also pipe up. Sorry. Hi, I'm the Q&A guy. My name's Alex. Just real quick. David did ask in the chat, would you say the two big jobs U.S. society had at the time were factories and farms?
Yeah. Like, I mean, it was, so like the two big jobs at the time were probably farming and factories. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry. The chat's going crazy. And I'm like, okay. But so this land is all coming from tribes, right? It's stolen land. It's land that's stolen from tribes to essentially create this nation that is then inherently imperial in a lot of ways. It goes along with that mission to be I realize I'm kind of going off the tracks a little bit in terms of like an economic and money talks. But it's what we see is that that land grants, the Homestead Act, the Railroad Act, they all are part of this larger economic mission for the United States to be like kind of like the most industrial, the most democratizing as well. So this education is part of that mission for democracy. But then the question is, so we can call these like all of this part of like a settler or colonial kind of vision. And so have y'all heard of manifest destiny? Yeah, so this actually plays into that. That moral land grant mission too plays into manifest destiny. Okay, going west, bringing those missions across the west, right? And what we see is that the education itself then is supposed to be one that is primarily male and white. Okay, for people to have education, like this kind of agricultural knowledge to create like essentially a white agrarian but industrial society. And that's where we see these kind of land grants kind of get their basic roots. And then what we see is like later on, or actually what we see at these schools too, is that women also go to land grant schools, okay? And they are learning the domestic arts. Has anybody taken home ec in here? Yeah, I took home ec. What was home ec? What did you learn in home ec?
Basically, sewing, making some simple foods.
Okay, yeah, sewing.
To be domestic.
Yeah, I remember I made a pillow that looked like a cow.
Do you still have it?
Yeah, I sewed a cow pillow, and I also made like smoothies and cookies and stuff.
Right.
And so that's what the home ec is. And basically they would also offer degrees for women at land grant colleges that were in the domestic arts. So for men, a lot of the classes are towards becoming like a farmer. And then for women, we see that education is like putting women into a funnel towards being like the most scientific housewife, essentially. And what we see later on with like land grants as well, is that there is in 1890 another moral land grant act that's signed, and this is specifically for historically Black colleges and universities. So what ends up happening is that there's white land grants and Black land grants. Okay, and what we've talked about is kind of like funneling people into certain trajectories. And what we see is that the education there's a disparity, one in funding between Black and white land grant schools, but also that there is a different kind of mission. What we find is that it's not necessarily, what we find is like in early on in Black land grant schools that like the mission is not necessarily to be like an independent farmer, but one that might work for somebody else, that the Black women that go to the schools, it might just be focused on more like also domestic arts too, but it's also kind of like more specifically about how to be essentially somebody's worker in their home, right? And so what we see is that like education, yes, there is like that freedom to like you get educated like that, there's that kind of democratizing thing element, but there's also that mission of what these educations are supposed to do. And it's not to say that like that's necessarily happening today, but it's definitely see that there's like kind of like education as a means to an end, right? To fit into a certain society. And even when we talk about democracy, right? Like the education towards a democracy, there's a certain mission there, right? Like civic virtue or whatever, to live together in a diverse society. Do y'all have any questions? I'm sorry, that was kind of long-winded.
No, that was great. I actually, the benefit is I actually do most of the fixing of torn clothing around our house because I know how to sew. I'm a good cook.
Sorry. There was a question from Kiani. She wanted to know if that maybe this process was equivalent to what happened in Hawaii, how basically homes are built up in Hawaiian land.
I don't actually know very much about Hawaiian history. I mean, if you want to explain a little bit. I don't want to put you on the
I took a I don't want to call it a guess, but I mean, I said the little bit I know in the chat, which is that most of the colonization of Hawaii is happening a little after this, and it has to do with sugar plantations. Like, so it's not so much like the education, although Terry is telling us that University of Hawaii is a land-grant college, and that makes sense. So it's slightly after the first part Karen was talking about, but it's still part of that larger expansion, and with that, education expanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually,
I continue. No, keep going. Sorry, I just want to say thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Yeah, I think that would probably be the same. Then that definitely happens in Hawaii. And what we see also in Hawaii is a larger a mission, definitely like a very overt mission of colonization. And I think that that's definitely part of, Manifest Destiny, but maybe one that's not as like overtly discussed as a part of an imperial mission of the United States of the 19th century. Yeah. But it's definitely part of, what's going on in Hawaii. And that's definitely what we see with, landowners. And did y'all learn about like the history of like Queen Liliuokalani and essentially the United States taking over Hawaii as a territory without the consent, of course, of any people that lived in the Hawaiian Islands. But yeah, it's
Oh no, I was just saying, yeah, I like that was just a question to ask because I wasn't sure. Like I thought it was on this like the same topic, but then I was like, maybe I should ask just to be clear.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's part and parcel of this larger kind of vision of what leaders in the United States kind of imagined themselves to be at that time. And it's definitely the rise of the United States as a quote unquote global superpower has a lot of its roots based out of the 19th century. And I think that even oddly enough, that public education and education that people receive at colleges is part and parcel of that mission at large. So economics, an economic mission of the nation.
Yeah, Karen, you said something in there that really stuck with me, which is, there's always a mission almost always a mission for what's being done. Like we want factory workers, we want farmers, but even with the democracy, which we would probably see as being more noble, there is a mission there too, right? Like we have this idea, you need certain skills. And it's not like farming and factory workers, like those were essential to the growth of industry, the country, feeding people. I would say, and maybe Terry and Reese want to jump in here too, that we have these same kind of tensions built into what we're all doing. Like some of us, we need a credential because we happen to be in a field where there's the need for a credential. I would say also that's starting in America around this same 1830s, 1840s, 1850s, the very idea of needing a school to sign a piece of paper saying you're qualified to do this. But we always have these, it's not as easy as saying like, well, it was good or bad. It was always both. And sometimes you were doing school because you wanted money, and sometimes someone was paying you to go to school because you were going to make them money. And we never know, like sometimes we don't even get a chance to stop and think, what is it that we're doing here? And why am I or taxpayers paying for it?
Mm-hmm. And that's a great question and great statement, because as I'm currently going through the doctoral process, early on, I think actually it was a conversation with you, Karen, now that I think about it. I was going to say someone was telling me, and it was Karen, that the doctoral process was pretty much generally are set up for like white men. And that is what I don't know if you remember our convo, Karen, but
Yeah, I do.
set up right for white men. And here I am as a Black woman, like, well, I am not a white man. So, but just thinking about how difficult the process is and how it was designed, because white men could leave the house to go get these degrees to be able to level up. And so I'm seeing how some of that systematic design is still at play and at work within this process. And I know that we have Dr. Graham in here as well, and she's our new associate director within the EDI Cares Department, and who has completed this. And so I marvel at any person of color, woman of color specifically, that has achieved their doctoral degree, because it was literally not set up for us to do it just as a woman, and especially as a woman of color, where David just talked about earlier that reading, no, we don't want you to be able to read or think. And now we're being trained to be a researcher. And so there's direct correlation to that, to this very day, in still the processes that go on. But Terry, I'm going to throw it to you, and then I have some takeaways at the bottom of the hour.
Yeah. Hey, we'd like to really thank Karen and David for being here today and giving us all this great information. And, you know, if there's anybody who has any questions that weren't answered yet or any follow-ups, drop those in the chat, and Alex can ask those before we head off today. It looks like we got about another 15 minutes or so in the show to answer questions and go through anything we want to go through. So yeah, I just oh, there comes my cat.
So, every time Terry's cat shows up, we know it's a good thing. So that will lead me into our Money Talk Tuesday takeaway. So I hope you guys got your notes. I hope you are, Terry, go ahead and let the people know what your background is. Let them know where you're at and what you represent.
I grew up here in Tacoma.
No, sorry, sir. Your virtual background. Is that what you mean, Paul?
Oh, is that the background? Oh, background. Yes.
Virtual? Okay.
Virtual background. Okay. Yes. Good question. Well, I work in the EDI Cares Department, and in the EDI Cares Department, we call ourselves Wakanda. And so that's where we are, broadcasting live from Wakanda. So I got several backgrounds that I use at different times. And Wakanda, if you've seen the movie Black Panther, that's where Wakanda is. It's part of that. And so, yeah, all kinds of scenes and backgrounds I have here.
Yes. Tell them that's where the money reside, right there in Wakanda.
Yeah, right. And that's, you know, recently I was talking about vibranium. You know, that's what we use to increase our money knowledge and keep it growing for us. And yeah, so that's kind of our background.
Yes. So here's the first thing. Everything that we just heard from David and Karen really talked about education. What are we paying for? So you just learned how we got to where we're at. And that was just the 10-second version of it. But again, this is Money Talk. So we want to be able to give you an opportunity to leave here with something to be able to apply in your future. So if we learn that majority of us were not even set up to be able to go to college, then we want to make sure that we know what our purpose is. Why are we in college in the first place? David just said some people were either like paid to go so they can get money, or somebody else was paying them, but that's an aspect. I honestly just told a friend she should go back to school to get her doctorate and get a student loan and live off of that for a little bit to be able to level up to the next stage. People do that. So there's ways that you can utilize and leverage, whether it be your student loans or your financial aid, and you're getting money while you're getting your education. So the way that I like to look at that is really as a paid internship. So the first question, again, like I said, is what is your purpose? Why are you in school? That's something we would want you to think about. Why am I in school in the first place? And then how does money and how does economics, where does that come into play? The other part to that is I would encourage you, and I'm sure we would all encourage you to major in your purpose. So if we can do a quick wrap around, Terry, Karen, and David, tell us what your majors are and your degrees. Go ahead, David.
I majored in history, and then my 2 graduate degrees are in philosophy and history. So no lucrative choices.
Yeah, mine not so lucrative either. As an undergrad, I have so bachelor's in history and African American studies, a master's in history, and a PhD in history. So, just lots of fun stuff. I was basically just having a lot of fun. But I think that was worth it. And I think that's also part of education, right? Is like finding meaning for yourself, finding something that you want to do, finding something that you find that you think is that you find fulfilling, right? Like that's something that is why you're in school. And also part of, we talked a lot about like kind of like the kind of industrial and agricultural and kind of like these larger emissions of like factories or the nation or whatever. But ultimately too, it's about, today, I think today it's about what you want to do also and what you think is fulfilling and what your dreams are. So that's something that you should,
Yeah, and I should say too, the jokes about it not being lucrative aside, like I don't think obviously that you should just pick your major based on what's going to get you rich.
Right.
And that's a choice you can try to make, but everything is too, there's no sure things. And I think you can major in a lot of different things and still, like Karen said, like be curious in other things. That's one reason, like we've all taken classes that were like, I only have to take this because some factory owner or somebody somewhere decided this should be part of the curriculum. And we're like, we don't really like this. But we also, you could think about it as like, you get a chance to take a lot of different things that are just interesting, even if you're never going to study it again.
Yeah. So for my bachelor's degree, I got a degree in physical education, health. And so I did coaching, basketball, baseball, football, you name it. And, I didn't really do a whole lot of PE teaching. I went straight to Pierce College and came here to Pierce and started doing counseling and advising. Got my master's degree in education also, because that's what I loved. And a lot of people say, Terry, why don't you get a degree in business? I said, well, I don't need a degree in business. I already know business. I started a business while I was at Pierce College. I started a mobile DJ company. And then I also started investing in stocks. And so I figured, I can do all those things on the side. Those are my passions, DJing and investing money. But what I love to do is help people. And so that's why I stayed with education, because I liked helping people. I liked sports, of course, too. That's why I went into physical education. I liked health because was part of it. Although don't judge me on my health these days in the pandemic. But overall, business is still part of me. I still read and understand just about anything in business. And so I theoretically probably could be awarded a bachelor's in business just for what I've self-taught over the last 25 years. Of course, that's not how they do it, unfortunately, in education, because I have to pay somebody for that. I can't just show them what I know. But anyway, that's kind of my background in education.
Dope. I love it all. And I'll round it out. So for me, I got and Terry didn't say his AA, but I got my AA in personal fitness training. I went to community college first as well and played basketball at Highline. And then I got my bachelor's in youth ministry and psychology. And then I got my master's in coaching and athletic administration. And my EDD, my doctorate will be in organizational leadership. So at the tip of this, I wanted all of us to share what our degrees are in, because I wanted you to hear that we all majored in our passions. We majored in the things that we felt were connected to our purpose. And for me, that's how I guided my education degree choices. I wanted to study this because I loved it. And that made school that much easier for me, was because I absolutely loved the knowledge that I was getting from, and I'm still in school to this day. I never would have thought that. I almost failed out of college my first year. And then here I am still getting a doctorate degree, which blows my mind. But I say that to you all because the school system was designed for you all to just be workers and to work in factories and farms. But now here we are in the year 2021, and we want you to know that that doesn't have to be the case anymore. You can major in your passion. You can major in something that you feel is connected to your purpose. And then the money will follow you. When you chase your purpose, the money will chase you because you're going to be in alignment with your assignment. And so we want to make sure that you know. And if you're like, I don't know what my purpose is, come on over and we will make sure that we help you figure that out while you're here at Pierce, because that for us in the EDI Cares department, and then obviously your two professors here today, that's what we care about, is you being able to major in your passion. Because when you do that and you have that kind of fulfillment, that's where that generational freedom comes from. That's going to allow you to unlock generational wealth. Money will be secondary. So make sure you tap in with us when it comes to that. The next thing that I want you to think about is, how are you going to use your education to fund your future, right? We're all here at a 2-year. How are you going to use your education now to fund your future, whether that may be at the 4-year level or beyond? So that's another just quick thing to think about. And so I want to leave you with this. There are a few factors of education that are priceless. Okay. They're just absolutely priceless. You cannot put a price on these specific things that I'm getting ready to lay out. Number one is network. There's no other place, especially for the age range that you're in, that you will be, and not even, I'm not even talking to a specific 18, 19, 20-year-olds. I'm just talking across the board, where you can network with people from across the globe and almost kind of for free, or get paid to network and build relationships that last for however long you want them to. You never know who will end up be doing what, where, when, where, how. And so networking is priceless. It's just like social media, but in person, and you guys are in class, so you're kind of studying the same things and have the same likes already. Iron sharpens iron. Make sure you're tapping in with your classmates as much as possible. The second thing is experience. Just like Terry just said, he could have and I would second that. I'd write a recommendation letter. Terry could have a PhD in business based off of experience. When you're in college and you're chasing after this degree, that's priceless to get experience doing different things. You know how you can do that? Through work study. The school offers work study in a multitude of different areas. If you need a job, hit me up at the EDI Cares department. We can hook you up with a paid internship because we want you to get experience in what your passion and your purpose is. So again, that's priceless. The third thing is time management. Tell me what other human being has the ability to learn how to balance homework, living, sports, sleeping, social life, and getting the assignments done on time. I mean, the anxiety is rising just thinking about it, right? Like, where else do you learn that prior to getting full-time in the workforce? So again, network, experience, time management. The fourth thing is skill building. Where else do you get to learn specific that you can take a course for pennies on the dollar and learn skills that are literally going to translate, that you could actually get paid for now? You don't have to wait to have a degree to get paid for something that you're really good at. So figure out, what are the classes that I want to take? I'm not proficient in this. Let me go ahead and figure that out. Let me tap in with one of my professors, because you're utilizing your network. And then the last thing is passion testing, especially when you're at a 2-year. Test your passion and figure out, do I really like this? Everybody told me to go to school to study this, so let me take one class on it and see if it's interesting. I hated that, or oh my gosh, I fell in love. And then allow that feeling to drive you all the way through to the rest of your education and go as far as you would like to go. Does that make sense? If that makes sense to anybody, make sure you let me know that I wasn't just talking out of my butt there. Awesome. So we're coming to a close. So the couple of things that I want to say in closing is we want to make sure you're using your education plan and connecting to your purpose, and making sure you're able to get a profit out of it, because everybody got to eat. If you are interested in signing up for some free one-on-one financial mindfulness sessions with Terry and I, or some purpose development sessions or anything like that, budgeting, credit cards, want to know about student loans, make sure you come back to Money Talks Tuesdays. But also, we can give you some one-on-one sessions where we can go through all the knowledge that we have. I'm a real estate investor, and I've been a business owner for 12 plus years. I also don't have a business degree, but I got mad experience. So if you're interested in anything like that, tap in with Terry and I. I'm going to throw this in the chat. And all you got to do is fill out this form. It'll take you less than 10 minutes to fill it out. It'll come straight to us and we'll set up an appointment with you. So that way you can stay connected with us with some purpose development and profit development, because we got you. Also, remember to sign up for CARES Act funding. The college has a whole lot of money that they want to give out to students. So all you got to do is fill out the CARES Act funding. And then if you have any questions about that, who should you hit up? Us. We got you. Hit us up and we can help you figure out how to do that. And then again, I threw that link in the chat and that'll come straight to us. So Karen, David, thank you. Thank you so much for blessing us with your knowledge today. If anybody has any final questions or anything, please throw it in the chat. Here is my email. I'm going to throw that in there. So if you need anything, hit me up or please fill out that link and we will get in contact with you. But we want to thank you so much for just giving us an hour of your time. David and Karen, thank you so much for bringing your your students here, so that way we can just bless them with this knowledge, and we're appreciative. So if anybody doesn't have anything else, that is a wrap with season 2, episode 1 of Money Talk Tuesdays. I almost said Plug Talk.
Oh, we were the premiere episode of season 2.
Premiere.
I didn't know. Hey, thanks for having us. It was a lot of fun, and you guys are doing great work.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Thanks for coming,
Thank you,
David.
guys.
Thanks for coming, Karen.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Sign up for our program down there, that link, and we'll see you again shortly, hopefully.
We'll
Thank
see
you very
when we
much.
see ya.
Yeah. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye, guys. Okay, let me
Stop record.
Yep, I'm gonna stop record. Shucks. Stop record.